The moment TLC filed a $1 million lawsuit and banned Andrei and Elizabeth for life, the reality TV world buckled. Not suspended, not benched for a few seasons, erased. No more spin-offs, no cameos, no streaming royalties. The network didn't just cut ties, they scorched the earth. Welcome to TLC Drama Files. I'm Aliva, and you're not going to believe how deep this actually goes. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Do you think Andrei went too far? Or is there more to this story no one's talking about? Because what got them banned wasn't a single argument or a walk-off. According to internal documents that were never supposed to see the light of day, TLC had been building a secret case against Andrei for years. Multiple seasons, hidden footage, crew testimonies, security logs. And once these files leaked, the truth started snowballing fast. But the most shocking part? TLC tried to keep all of it under wraps, until something happened behind the scenes that even they couldn't bury. What went down during that final call turned a reality show couple into a full-blown legal risk. And that was only the beginning. They were once the franchise's blueprint for fire and ice drama. Andrei, the unapologetic alpha, and Elizabeth, the southern sweetheart with a stubborn streak. Fans either loved them or hated them, but either way, they watched. For TLC, that kind of loyalty meant numbers, sponsors, and spin-offs. But behind the noise and meme-worthy moments was a slow, ticking time bomb that finally exploded over one phone call. A call that changed everything. According to multiple insider sources, the final termination didn't happen in some dramatic boardroom meeting or legal courtroom. It happened over Zoom. TLC arranged a private virtual meeting after months of internal debates. And at first, it was supposed to be clean. Legal reps, rope-tight contracts, a proposed exit deal, including a non-disclosure agreement. No headlines, no drama, just disappear quietly. Andrei didn't just reject the offer. He detonated. What insiders describe as a combative and unstable outburst shook the legal team. He allegedly accused the producers of sabotaging his life, manipulating scenes to humiliate him, and warned them, on record, that if they went through with the ban, he'd expose everything. Not just his scenes, everything, policies, edits, off-camera production tactics. He even threatened to bring in outside investigators. The legal rep leading the call reportedly ended the meeting mid-sentence and immediately flagged it to corporate. That's when the network panic began. And because what most fans didn't know is that this final mess wasn't a fluke. Internally, TLC had reportedly been accumulating red flags for years. Starting back in season 6, there were logs of increasingly erratic behavior from Andrei behind the scenes. Aggressive arguments with crew when he disliked the storyline. Allegedly stepping into producers' personal space during off-camera disagreements and refusing to film unless scenes were rewritten to show him in control. For a while, the network brushed it off as passion, method acting, maybe even good TV, but crew members saw it differently. One anonymous cameraman told an internal investigator that Andrei weaponized the cameras, that he could sense when the show needed conflict and then intentionally cranked up the tension, not for ratings, but for power. And when the cameras were turned off, that's when things got worse. Another crew member said, Andrei had a presence that filled a room, and not in a good way. People stopped voicing ideas around him. Any tension in the air would set him off. Internal reports documented moments on set where production had to physically pause because team members didn't feel safe. It wasn't daily chaos, but it was consistent enough for TLC to create an unofficial policy. Never let Andrei be approached alone by a single crew member. They even quietly reassigned staff who requested transfers away from his scenes. And just when you think the worst is over, the real chaos hasn't even started. That termination call lit the final fuse, but the network had the explosives stacked in a vault long before then. What they didn't expect? The fuse wouldn't stop burning after the call. It would explode inward. Legal risk, staff morale, even brand partnerships. Each one started shaking under the weight of a secret TLC had carried for 4 years. The leaked files didn't come from a dramatic drop in a public courtroom, and they weren't part of a juicy press release. They surfaced quietly. A whisper, a screenshot, a forwarded email thread. At first, it sounded like rumors, but then it started stacking. Incident logs, internal memos, time-stamped entries, and redacted testimonies with phrases that never make it into PR spin. Volatile response, crew re-traumatized. Scene unusable due to subject aggression. Suddenly, the whispers had teeth. According to sources close to production, TLC had been documenting Andrei and Elizabeth's on-set behavior for nearly 4 full years. Almost every season since their early premiere had at least one entry flagged in what insiders now call the misconduct file, a term borrowed from legal HR language but used here to mask just how much went wrong. This wasn't one bad day. It was waves, patterns, repeats. The earliest reports paint a slow incline, from frustration with production scripts to outright refusal to participate unless scenes served Andrei's self-image. One email from a producer in Season 6 read, "He will not do the scene unless it's rewritten. He says he won't be filmed being challenged by anyone." That demand, according to leaked emails in the archive, became a regular threat. No hero edit, no cooperation. Then came the hotel incidents. Several files referenced late-night outbursts during cast retreats that never made it to air. In one event, Andrei allegedly cornered a junior cameraman in the hallway, accusing him of manipulating interactions for a drama bump. The incident was so severe, the cameraman reportedly left the next morning and didn't return to the shoot. Another moment, filed under Emergency Response 038, involved security escorting Andrei back to his room after staff claimed they heard yelling through the walls loud enough to wake guests from adjoining floors. None of it aired. None of it was even whispered about on Pillow Talk or fan interviews. TLC buried it, and it didn't stop at Andrei. As his outbursts intensified, Elizabeth allegedly became more difficult to work with too. Not in confrontations, but in silence. Passive resistance. She began skipping early call times, adjusting her responses mid-scene to steer away from chosen narratives, and, in multiple instances, directly told producers she would not allow my husband to be edited into a villain. Publicly, it looked like loyalty. Internally, producers flagged it as obstruction. Now here's where the psychology spins the entire thing sideways. Why would TLC keep it hidden? Why keep inviting the couple back season after season if they had all this documented? The answer, according to multiple production staff, is terrifyingly simple. They were good for business. Every freakout fueled the algorithm. Every family argument, every dramatic walkout, every instant Andrei stared down a relative at the table and dared them to blink. Fans clipped it, shared it, engaged with it. Even hate watching counted toward metrics. And to be honest, the producers were stuck. If they dropped the couple too soon, they'd trigger public suspicion or lose momentum in viewership. If they pushed back too hard, they risked provoking more backstage chaos. So they told themselves it was manageable, or personal, or temporary. But by season 9, no amount of narrative crafting could polish the reality anymore. And if you think TLC did this out of nowhere, the receipts go back 4 years, and they're ugly. The files began piling higher than anyone anticipated. Not just scenes gone bad, but logistical nightmares, security complaints, audio team resignations, schedule replacements. One assistant director allegedly warned mid-shoot, "This is the last time I will walk into a room with him unless I have backup." Some staff felt worn down. Others just left. A story that started as firecrackers for TV turned into a morale crisis for the crew. So what changed? What finally made TLC stop protecting them? It wasn't a single fight or scene. It was a confrontation that didn't even happen on camera. A group cast event meant to be light and funny spiraled into a verbal clash so intense, one cast member left in tears, threatened to quit the show on the spot, and had to be escorted back to the hotel. No one talked. No one posted. But TLC documented every second. Legal had seen enough. They met once more that month, and this time, no one hesitated. The final call wasn't about saving a couple's reputation. It was about saving the franchise itself. For a while, Andrei was reality TV gold. He wasn't just dramatic. He was combustible. Say one wrong word, and he'd light up a family dinner or hijack an interview mid-roll. Viewers tuned in just to see how he'd blow, not if. Love him or loathe him. He delivered entertainment every single time. And TLC leaned into it hard. More screen time, more spin-off appearances, more front and center storylines. Internally, some producers called it a gamble. Others called it a slow-motion disaster. Because for every minute Andrei held an audience in thrall, production paid for it behind the scenes. Delays, rewrites, walkouts. Reschedules. One anonymous assistant producer described it like this. Between the real drama and the chaos he created off-camera, it became impossible to keep a normal shooting schedule. Everyone was on edge every single day. Filming became unpredictable, not just creatively, but logistically. If Andrei didn't like the scene, it went nowhere. If Elizabeth didn't like a line, she'd pause mid-take and kill the flow completely. They began turning standard shoots into 5-hour headaches. And then came the hotel blacklists. According to multiple sources, a Florida hotel that had hosted part of the family filming flat out refused to work with the production again after an incident involving Andrei allegedly yelling at a front desk employee over room service. No cameras were rolling, no plot was unfolding, just anger. Loud, relentless, and in full view of guests. The hotel staff filed an official complaint threatening to ban TLC from future bookings unless Andrei was removed. That same week, 2 crew members submitted requests to be reassigned. One refused to ride in the transport van if Andrei was inside. Another left mid-season, citing unresolved security concerns as the reason. The risk began outweighing the ratings, even with record-breaking view counts on streaming reruns. This was when the phrase "cost of drama" started circulating among executives, because the numbers looked worse when broken down. Production delays tallied into hundreds of thousands. Partner brands started asking why segments with Andrei were pulled last minute. Some even paused ad packages altogether. By the end of Season 9's first filming block, TLC had reportedly spent more money managing Andrei than on 3 new couples combined. And yet, for all this noise, Elizabeth had managed, for years, to be the balancing force. She was the sigh between storms. The eye in the middle of his hurricanes, calm, smiling, palatable. The network liked that. It gave them contrast. Gave the audience someone softer to hold on to while Andrei did the heavy lifting, controversy-wise. But then she shifted, slowly, quietly. She stopped going along with scenes. Not dramatically, not in a table-flipping way, but in 1,000 small, intentional refusals. It wasn't what she said. It was the deadpan stare after a prompt. The walkouts mid-filming when the story wasn't flattering enough. Producers started calling it the freeze. She'd show up, listen, and then just stop. 1 minute into a take, she'd walk away. No warning, no explanation. No one dared follow her. And if you thought Elizabeth would play peacemaker, her own rebellion shocked everyone. For a while, it seemed like she was simply defending Andrei, but the pattern started shifting. She wasn't just shielding him, she was actively controlling the direction of their narrative, deciding which lines would land, which scenes could fly, and what producers were allowed to film. A couple once framed as chaotic but captivating was now rigid, confrontational, and blocking production from doing its job. So why did Elizabeth, the calmer one, start playing hardball herself? It turns out her transformation had less to do with loyalty to Andrei, and more to do with how she felt about TLC itself. Elizabeth didn't explode like Andrei did. She didn't curse out producers or threaten lawsuits. Her power move was silence, and it was just as disruptive. Once seen as the softer half of the pair, the one who smoothed over Andrei's outbursts and kept filming on track, Elizabeth began changing, And once she did, the crew knew the storm wasn't going to be coming from one direction anymore. Her shift didn't come with warnings. It started with a look, a pause, a quiet no that replaced enthusiastic takes. Producers used to her bubbly cooperation began referring to her as unreachable. When scenes didn't suit her or Andrei's portrayal, she simply stopped talking. Literally. There were filming days where she would sit in frame, deliver one or two clipped answers, and then get up and walk off with no pre-planned cut. No explanation. She wasn't asking for permission. She was rejecting power. To someone watching from the outside, it might have looked like defiance, but inside the chaos, many started to read it differently. While Andrei barked, Elizabeth froze. While he confronted, she withdrew. Not out of disrespect for the crew, but some believe it was protection. A quiet form of protest against how her husband was repeatedly framed in ways she claimed weren't accurate. In her eyes, TLC wasn't documenting reality. They were scripting humiliations. By season 8, she reportedly began telling close staff that she wouldn't allow her husband to be portrayed as a monster in every episode just because it worked for views. In private texts seen by someone close to production, Elizabeth allegedly wrote, "They only want the bad side, and it's making him worse." From her perspective, the narrative control wasn't just unfair, it was exploitative. But the tight leash she began keeping on access, direction, and dialogue didn't only hurt producers. It made a volatile situation worse. When Elizabeth stopped cooperating, Andrei got more reactive. He saw every camera as a trap, every suggestion as bait. And instead of defusing him, she started deflecting crew away entirely, stepping between him and staff, insisting on script reviews, canceling pickups before they even started. What started as loyalty turned into a siege, and TLC producers were begging for backup. The most critical moment came during a family shoot, a so-called calm dinner that was anything but. The setting was supposed to be easy, warm, a relaxing regroup with Elizabeth's family after a tense segment with Andrei. But that night, something cracked. A line was crossed, or maybe a conversation veered where it shouldn't. But what happened next made history. Andrei and one of Elizabeth's relatives got into a heat match so loud, production sound couldn't even salvage a clean backup track. Furniture was bumped, voices were raised. And according to the log entry from that night, a producer stepped in just before one of the crew radioed for emergency support. Security arrived within minutes. Elizabeth, usually the one holding it together, reportedly broke down and asked for the cameras to cut immediately. What no one on screen ever saw was that TLC had their hand hovering over the panic button that night. If it had gone 2 minutes longer, they would have dialed the police, not for drama, for safety. That moment was the beginning of the end for TLC's patience. Elizabeth wasn't doing damage control anymore. She was fighting a war, and the crew was caught in the middle. The night everything snapped wasn't supposed to be high stakes. Production had scheduled it as a routine family scene, one of those safe dinner segments scripted to wrap tension in a bow. The plan was simple. Gather Elizabeth's relatives, let them share some light banter, and gently pivot to emotional resolution. TLC producers thought they were finally getting a breather. One quiet evening, a filler episode, no fireworks. Instead, they got security on standby. According to internal notes seen by someone close to the crew, Andrei arrived already agitated. He had reportedly refused to shoot earlier that morning after questioning the scene outline. He believed he was being set up to look bad once again. The energy he walked in with wasn't subtle. It was electric. Tight jaw, dead stare, long silences instead of greetings. Multiple staff members later described the mood on set as charged. Even Elizabeth, who usually mediated, was visibly tense. Then came the trigger. One of Elizabeth's siblings, unaware of Andrei's mood, or maybe pushing the storyline as coached, made a sarcastic comment about control issues. It was meant to be a laugh line, some back and forth teasing. But Andrei took it as a personal attack. He didn't yell immediately. He didn't shout. At first, he leaned back in his chair and glared, long and hard. And when he did speak, it wasn't theatrical. It was low cold and alarming. He accused the sibling of being a puppet for production, paused, then turned directly to a producer standing just off camera and said, "He's being fed that line by you. I know this game." The room froze. Elizabeth's dad tried to cut the tension with a joke. Wrong move. Andrei flipped. The volume shot up. According to the internal shoot log, a producer stepped in between Andrei and the family table, not symbolically, physically, blocking a straight-line escalation. Cast members left the room. The youngest family member reportedly burst into tears. At that moment, a crew member radioed for Level 2 security protocol. That's TLC's internal code for crew endangering conflict. Seconds later, uniformed security entered and waited quietly at the edges of the set. They didn't remove Andrei. They didn't handcuff him for the cameras. But they stayed there, waiting, watching, instructed to shadow his movements until filming shut down. No one talked much after. No rap report, no drinks afterward. Almost nothing from that night made it to air. It was wiped from the season edit, sanitized and restructured to make filming seem normal. But insider accounts confirm this wasn't a conflict. It was the first time producers feared something physical might actually happen. And there were no backup plans left to fall on. This took things to a level TLC had never publicly acknowledged before. Behind the scenes, they initiated their internal crisis response, normally used only for severe emergency situations involving accidents or legal threats. And the question grew louder in the executive offices. How did it get this bad? Why was crew safety suddenly up for debate? And what if I told you, and this is documented, that security had to follow Andrei around off-camera? Post-incident reports show that, for the remainder of that filming period, one staff member from the internal security team was assigned to watch Andrei during all transitions, between scenes, from transport to hotels, on downtime breaks. Not to intimidate, to avoid escalation. The production started quietly putting up invisible walls. Crew told to speak only when necessary. Producers instructed to alter scripts to avoid trigger lines. Call sheets distributed in staggered windows so fewer people crossed paths with Andrei in shared spaces. They were building an unofficial buffer around one cast member for survival, not sympathy. Now, psychologically, this opened the floodgates. What happens when you design a reality show around people being raw and confrontational? But one of those people starts believing they're being hunted on set? Some on staff try to offer empathy. Years in the public eye, constant online hate, storyline pressure, it adds up. But sympathy wasn't enough to stop the damage. You could no longer predict what would tip him over. And worse, there was growing mistrust between the cast and the crew. Nobody felt safe giving feedback, suggesting notes, or even riding the same transport shuttles. The emotional charge on set had turned logistical, legal, almost tactical. It fundamentally changed how Season 9 was executed. Everything had to be stripped down for risk management. One anonymous producer described it like this: "We stopped making a show, we started managing a problem." So now a harder question surfaces. The one that could taint the franchise if fans started asking it too loudly. If Andrei had a behavioral pattern this visible, this consistent, with records, complaints, recordings, and staff reshuffles to prove it, were TLC executives complicit? Did they know and ignore the warnings because he kept their ratings high? Did they let the machine continue while people around him were asking for help? Or worse, were they using the tension to fuel scripted drama while pretending it was all just coincidence? That's the kind of question no network PR team ever wants to answer on record. And yet, behind closed doors, people were starting to ask exactly that. It got so bad, TLC stopped counting on producers and crew reports. They wanted eyes, unfiltered access, quiet, passive surveillance in the one place the cast didn't expect it, outside the show. Not stage sets or green rooms or glam trailers, but the in-between places, the hallways, the elevators, the hotel lobbies, the passenger vans that took the cast from their rooms to the sets. Production insiders say TLC ordered internal security teams to review footage from every available camera feed in their control. Not for show content. For liability, they were looking to see what really happened when the microphones were off, if the flare-ups were isolated, or if something had been snowballing off camera since long before things got official. What they reportedly found confirmed what crew had been whispering for over a year. Andrei didn't just perform for drama. He carried that fire everywhere. According to early transcripts and internal notes tied to the now active lawsuit, footage showed Andrei pacing aggressively in hotel hallways late at night, slamming room doors, having animated, possibly threatening, conversations with unseen staff or cast, and muttering frustrations in transit vans, sometimes alone. These weren't staged walk-offs or over-the-top drama crafted for television. They were fragments of stress that didn't stop after the shoot wrapped each night. And this wasn't edited for perception or painted in one-sided hindsight. This was raw, environmental data, ambient behavior, not because there were narratives unfolding, but because people were now living in a pressure cooker the show had helped create. Soon, it didn't matter how good the content he delivered was. TLC was faced with a much darker equation. How much did it cost to keep filming him? And was it worth the risk to keep trying? Because the financial toll was now undeniable. Internal legal summaries tied to the lawsuit show TLC claiming over $300,000 in canceled shooting days due to on-set incidents, $200,000 in last-minute reshoots caused by non-cooperation, $120,000 in additional legal and security staffing from the time they triggered crisis protocol, $180,000 in post-production editing to salvage disrupted footage, and another $100,000+ in damages tied to brand partnerships and postponed syndication deals affected by the couple's growing volatility. That's not drama for dollars. That's a business bleeding cash just to keep appearances running. At one point, the nightly shoot reports started including short sections titled Cast Welfare Concerns. That had never happened on this show before. Not in nearly a decade of pairs fighting over green cards, cheating rumors, and 3 a.m. hotel scream matches. Even the wildest couples had edges that could be managed. But this wasn't wild. It was unpredictable, which, in legal terms, is worse. Because unpredictability forces insurance to get involved. It activates non-disclosure clauses. It raises the flag that what started as reality TV now qualifies under workplace hazard language. And once you cross that line, once someone in legal puts in writing that crew morale and safety feel legally threatened, a network has no choice but to act, or risk losing everything else. But before they dropped the hammer, TLC made sure no detail escaped. Every shooting day was retroactively re-examined. Crew emails were pulled. Casting decisions were re-reviewed. Producers were allegedly even asked to reconstruct the original outlines of Season 9 scenes to see how much had gone off track. Not to salvage the show, but to protect themselves in court. And this is where things started triggering real fear. Not just among the crew or the cast still under contract, but from other stars who read the headlines and started asking, wait, if TLC is watching what you do off camera, what about everything else that's never meant to be seen? Because now the big illusion was falling apart. The promise that what happens behind the scenes was always in service of the show and not being logged somewhere for legal battle later. The surveillance was no longer a tool for better storytelling. It had become protection, and that freaked people out. This wasn't just about one couple. It's a warning shot to every future star on the network. If you think nothing you say or do between scenes is being recorded for later use, think again. The line between reality star and workplace liability just got razor thin, and the network is siding with the law, not the storyline. For longtime fans, this shatters everything. The idea that the show's chaos was messy but mostly safe? That arguments at the table ended with a hug off-screen? Gone. Production sources now say 2 new cast couples have insisted on legal clauses protecting them from surveillance review unless something illegal happens. TLC hasn't publicly responded. Because behind closed doors, they're rewriting protocols word by word. And it raises an even bigger question about how this whole genre moves forward. What happens when the risk outweighs the ratings? When a man's on-screen volatility becomes not a hook, but a hazard? And when a network, known for engineering smiles and meltdowns alike, quietly admits they were scared of what might happen next? Because that's the part no spin can cover. Not even with fancy edits or voiceovers, reality TV at its core thrives on tension. It makes everyday conflict bingeable. Turned-up personalities, controlled doses of discomfort. You tune in, not despite the chaos, but for it. But what if that chaos gets real? What if it bleeds into the crew's lives, their safety, their well-being? Then it stops being content and starts being crisis management. And that's what TLC has had to confront. Off-camera, off-brand, off-script. But the damage doesn't stop at Andrei and Elizabeth's story. What started here is echoing quietly through the rest of the franchise. Because what the audience never sees is what happens after the lights cut off. So how does this change the game for every couple hoping to build a brand, a career, or a following through 90 Day Fiancé? The answer lies in what TLC's rebuilding behind the curtain right now. And it's not the next season's teaser trailer. It's a legal firewall. The day TLC officially terminated Andrei and Elizabeth's contract, most expected the storm to finally be over. But it wasn't the end. According to people close to the situation, it was just the moment the fuse met the flame. The lawsuit had barely been filed when things spun out again. This time, off-camera, off-contract, and still very much on TLC's radar. Word spread fast inside production bunkers and legal offices that Andrei had been making calls. Calls that didn't go through PR, didn't go through agents, didn't go through lawyers. He allegedly reached out directly to mid-level producers, former assistant crew members, and even talent from previous seasons. And the message wasn't subtle. If the network wanted war, he'd bring one. Insiders claim Andrei threatened to go public with everything. Tapes, emails, casting manipulation, filming tactics, things TLC never wanted viewers to know about. He allegedly claimed he kept archives of messages, conversations about editing scenes to produce explosive moments, and even accused producers of goading him on set just to manufacture chaos. One source who reportedly heard the call firsthand said Andrei ranted, "They made me into this villain. You think I'm the only one who lost it? You think I'm gonna fall alone?" That moment sent legal into full lockdown. TLC's legal division and outside counsel began prepping for the worst-case scenario. A disgruntled former star with both motive and receipts, ready to burn everything to the ground. Meetings were moved to encrypted calls. Contractors renegotiated their NDAs. Anyone still in contact with Andrei was advised to stop. Cease and desist letters were drafted in case he went public. Even social media team responses were pre-written and saved in the event he dropped something live and unfiltered online. It wasn't just about silencing him, it was about containing the ripple. Because platforms like Cameo, Instagram, and TikTok weren't just side gigs anymore. They were fully monetized income streams that spun off directly from 90-day exposure. And if Andrei tainted those, he'd be setting fire to the revenue funnel for every other cast member who depended on the brand's family-friendly illusion to stay afloat. Which brings us to the part no one really talks about: pressure. Because not every cast member who goes through this show explodes. Not everyone ends up threatening networks or getting shadowed by security. Some quietly exit, some build influencer careers, some stay married, and a remarkable few even stay beloved. So what's different in a case like this? Could it be that Andrei wasn't built for the machine, and the machine didn't care until he broke? It's worth asking honestly. For years, Andrei was painted as the loudmouth, the overbearing voice in every room. But step back. Ask yourself this: what happens to someone who becomes a caricature of himself in every scene? What does that do to your identity, your psychology, your coping skills? If your job, for literal years, is to perform conflict for millions of judgmental strangers, what version of yourself survives that? Maybe Andrei cracked because the role he was screened into became too real. Or maybe the power he got from it made him believe he was untouchable. Either way, it's clear the structure built to amplify his presence did almost nothing to protect him, or anyone around him, once it went bad. But no matter how much empathy you bring to that theory, the aftermath still draws a hard line, because the damage went far beyond feelings. It became measurable, monetizable, devastating. Brands that had previously courted Elizabeth and Andrei for family-style sponsored content began pulling out. Collaborations paused. Cameo orders dropped dramatically. Companies that once used their clips for engagement started requesting their content be pulled from pipelines. It wasn't just that they were banned from the franchise, it was that the association with their names suddenly became high risk. One marketer reportedly told TLC's sales team, "They were great for chaos, not for credibility. We can't sell toothpaste after that." The couple's remaining monetization streams also started crumbling. Without a presence on the show, TLC-affiliated streaming platforms no longer had any contractual obligation to promote their old clips. Reddit and Twitter threads exploded with debates over whether they should be digitally scrubbed, like other scandalized reality stars. It hasn't happened yet, but the conversation alone lit a fire under every agent managing current talent. The fallout didn't end with a lawsuit. It triggered a collapse they were never prepared for. One producer put it bluntly, it exposed a crack in the franchise, the part nobody wants to talk about. That if someone breaks down, if someone really spirals, it's not just on them. What made them spiral came from the inside too. And now, the dominoes keep tipping. Other cast members began quietly asking production teams about the status of their behavior logs. Handlers reported being asked off the record whether certain scenes had anything written up. One BH lead noted that multiple past alumni had reached out to confirm if their own off-camera clips were kept and who had access to them. Why? Because they saw what happened to Andrei, and they realized everything's on the record, even when the record isn't rolling. But there's one question fans keep asking. What about their spin-offs? What about the next chapter in the storyline? Weren't Andrei and Elizabeth about to headline another TLC add-on? That's where it gets messier. Multiple TLC insiders confirm that a spin-off pitch centered around their life, post-Happily Ever After, was well into early planning stages. Title concepts, sponsor decks, even tentative air date planning. It wasn't locked, but it was in motion. And once the legal war began, all drafts were shelved, indefinitely. Same with Cameo. Fans noticed their accounts froze slowly, erratically. First Andrei, then Elizabeth's, then their couple package. It wasn't an announcement, it was a quiet fade. With no new uploads, no scheduled videos, and a growing flood of unanswered reviews, it became clear they weren't just taking a break. They were being locked out. At this point, everything they built on the back of the show is sinking. The deals, the appearances, the rerun royalties, all slipping further away with every legal counterstrike filed. What started as a drama series has ended in a bankruptcy of reputation. And we haven't even hit the real twist yet. The moment TLC's lawsuit went public, so did the fracture. For every viewer who said, "Finally," there was another who commented, "This feels shady." The fandom split in two. Those who believed the couple deserved consequences, and those who started questioning why it took the network 4 years to act on what they clearly knew was spiraling. Because by the time Andrei and Elizabeth were officially banned, the damage wasn't limited to them. The spotlight had shifted. Suddenly, people weren't only asking what the couple had done behind the scenes, they were asking what TLC allowed behind the scenes. On subreddits, Instagram threads, and even fan podcasts, followers started connecting the dots. The late-night outbursts, the missing crew members, the oddly edited scenes from past seasons that now, in hindsight, looked a little too clean. The brand's carefully engineered chaos started to look like something else. A pressure cooker. One that TLC knew was about to blow, but kept pushing for one more season. And that's when the backlash widened. Not just at Andrei, but at the structure, the system, the unspoken understanding between networks and viewers that we're watching a reality, when in fact, what we're watching might be broken people held together with legal tape and production notes. Insiders say the ripple effect was immediate. Crew attrition increased. Contract renegotiations for upcoming seasons started including stronger safety clauses and clearer exit terms. Veteran cast members, the ones who had survived their arcs more or less intact, began pulling back from network engagement, avoiding press, limiting interviews. They didn't want their reactions cut into clips that tied them to a franchise now tangled in legal fallout and security complaints. And there's the heart of the issue. This wasn't just one couple spiraling. It was just the first time it leaked this cleanly. Because, let's be honest, Andrei wasn't the first cast member to threaten staff, or to push back on storylines, or to unravel under the pressure of carrying a facade for 4 straight seasons, but the files that surfaced were so organized and so comprehensive, it shattered the illusion that this could ever be dismissed as just drama. There were emails, logs, internal surveillance, producer screenshots. If this much documentation exists on one couple, what else is buried behind that happy ever after smile? It's a fair question, and fans are asking it louder than ever. They're revisiting old episodes, watching scenes for signs of crew discomfort in the background, picking apart interviews Elizabeth gave on promotional tours where her tone didn't match the narrative, comparing episodes where sudden tone shifts suggest a fight was edited down, cleaned up, erased, because the show sells transformation. Couples grow, fight, break, heal, learn, reunite. That's the story arc we're sold. But for some cast members, the real transformation happens off-screen, after the credits roll, and often under the kind of stress that rewires a person completely. And here's where a quieter tragedy sits. TLC, for all its colorful intros and goofy musical transitions, had created an environment where fear and fame quietly blurred together, where bigger performances brought bigger contracts, but also bigger cracks in real marriages. Bigger tears at dinner. Bigger breakdowns in confessionals filmed on day 21 of a shoot that was supposed to wrap in 10. Reality TV isn't supposed to be therapy, but it shouldn't be trauma theater either. And now that Andrei and Elizabeth scandal is wide open, it's forced casual fans, longtime followers, and even producers hovering behind the scenes to ask harder questions. How many other couples were breaking down off-camera while the show kept rolling? How many loud confrontations were groomed into episodes while the quiet meltdowns behind the scenes were buried? How many warning signs were shelved in folders labeled future issue if needed? And is the machine so dependent on drama that it would rather rupture than slow down? Because for every iconic, explosive fight on this show, there was likely at least one cast member who didn't want to play anymore, who couldn't make it funny, who wasn't built for conflict but felt trapped by the storyline. Andrei was a fuse, but the franchise was the room full of gasoline. Elizabeth was a shield, then a soldier, then something else entirely. And whatever end they were both headed toward, the show made sure viewers watched every mile of it right up until it became too dark to control. And if this is what leaked, imagine what's still under wraps on your favorite show. The franchise will survive this, most likely, but not untouched, not unshaken. Because what started as one legal battle between a couple and a network has started to expose the emotional debt reality TV doesn't talk about. The cost of performance, the burnout of constant judgment, the toll of selling conflict to the internet and calling it a career. And for viewers who loved watching Andrei and Elizabeth as a guilty pleasure drama, it's okay to feel torn now. This story is messy, not just on screen, but in your gut. You can critique the behavior while understanding why someone might crack under non-stop filming schedules and years of being boxed into one edit. You can call out the chaos while also acknowledging the system designed to profit from that explosion. Because that's what really broke here. Not just one cast member, not just one couple. It was the illusion that casting a show with real people was ever going to be safe. or fair, or simple. And next, well, let's just say there's another couple who's also been quietly pulled off planned shoots, right between seasons. Not fired, not announced, just gone. Because sometimes TLC makes those moves before the viewers start asking questions. And that's where we're headed.